The marriage ceremony took place beneath the chandeliers of a hotel Elowen Marquette might lose before morning. There were no flowers, no music, and no promises about love. Only two independent lawyers, an elderly trustee, and a civil officiant waiting beside a stack of contracts. Elowen wore ivory silk. Dashiell Crane wore the only charcoal suit he owned. To the board, he was a widowed restoration craftsman living with his daughter in a caretaker cottage. A respectable poor man willing to help a cornered chief executive satisfy an antiquated inheritance clause. Then Dashiell placed a worn brass elevator key beside the prenuptial agreement. The lender's attorney saw the tiny compass crest stamped into its bow and stopped breathing for a second. Inside the attorney's leather folder was a sealed notice naming the new controlling beneficiary of Northline Infrastructure Trust, the private fund that held Marquette Heritage's debt. The name on that notice was Dashiell Crane. Elowen signed the marriage certificate, believing she was protecting her company from a fortune powerful enough to destroy it. She had no idea the quiet single father signing beside her had inherited control of that fortune 3 days earlier. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? 6 weeks earlier, rain entered the Marquette Grand through a crack above the old railway ballroom. Dashiell Crane found it before the ceiling stained. At 40, he had the powerful balanced build of a man who lifted stone mantles with straps instead of ego. He was tall and broad, with a distinctive trapezoid-shaped face, glacier blue eyes beneath straight tawny brows, a strong nose bent slightly from an old construction accident, a narrow scar crossing his upper lip, and realistic fair skin weathered by outdoor work. His thick ash-blonde hair fell in controlled waves with a natural pale streak above his right temple. Short, sand-colored stubble sharpened a heavy jaw. He wore a fitted, deep forest ribbed merino shirt with the collar open, a weathered camel suede work jacket, tailored dark brown canvas trousers, a brushed steel watch, and worn but polished leather boots. The clothes were modest, masculine, and cut well enough to prove poverty did not require carelessness. Dashiell directed restoration crews at the Marquette Grand, a 1912 railway hotel built around a marble concourse and a brass-caged service elevator. He also raised 10-year-old Tova alone. His wife had died 6 years earlier after a fast-moving infection. Since then, Dashiell and Tova lived in a 2-bedroom caretaker cottage behind the hotel's winter garden. His salary covered school, groceries, and little else. He repaired their furniture himself and kept one emergency envelope in a kitchen drawer. Tova believed the hotel belonged partly to everyone who knew where it creaked. She carried a worn brass elevator key on a red cord. Dashiell's grandfather had given it to him as a child, claiming it once opened every honest room in the building. The key no longer operated the modern elevator. Tova used it to measure straight margins in her sketchbook. That afternoon, Dashiell traced the leak to a copper flashing joint above the ballroom cornice. He closed the room before plaster could fall and moved a scheduled investor dinner into the glass-roofed conservatory. Elowen Marquette arrived while he was lowering the final chandelier cover. She was 36 and looked nothing like a generic corporate heir. Her long champagne blonde hair fell in glossy sculpted waves beneath one shoulder. Large turquoise green eyes, softly arched brows, high elegant cheekbones, a refined narrow nose, and full rose-plum lips gave her a luminous, unmistakable face. She had a tall, voluptuous hourglass figure and the disciplined posture of a woman who had learned to make exhaustion look expensive. Elowen wore an opaque-fitted sapphire blue silk wrap dress with a tasteful moderate neckline, structured waist, and calf-length skirt beneath a cream wool coat. Gold drop earrings, a slim vintage bracelet, and nude leather heels completed a bold premium look. She ran Marquette Heritage Hotels, 15 historic properties inherited with more debt than profit. The Marquette Grand was the flagship and the collateral. How bad? She asked, looking up at the protected ceiling. Repairable. The ballroom stays closed for 10 days. The bondholders tour it Friday. Then show them a company that closes a room before someone gets hurt. Elowyn looked at him. They had worked together for 14 months. Attraction lived between them in small, disciplined places. Coffee left beside his plans. His coat placed over her chair when the heating failed. The way she remembered Tova's school exhibition without using the child to seem warm. Neither had crossed the line. Dashiell was an independent contractor, but Elowyn controlled whether his largest project continued. "Move the tour," she said. He nodded once. That decision saved the ceiling and cost the company its last comfortable lie. During the rescheduled tour, the bondholders saw tarps, scaffolding, and a preservation report estimating $12 million in urgent work across 3 properties. The figures were accurate. Earlier presentations had spread the repairs over 5 years. 2 days later, the lender refused to extend a $160 million balloon payment without new voting collateral. Elowyn had 90 days. Her general counsel opened a walnut box that had remained sealed since her grandmother's death. Inside was the Marquette Founders Trust, written in 1958 by a man who believed marriage proved stability. 38% of the company's voting shares would pass to Elowyn when she entered a lawful marriage and her spouse signed a stewardship covenant. If she remained unmarried until 40, the shares passed then without a spouse. Until either event, an elderly family trustee controlled them and could not pledge them to lenders. The clause was antiquated and possibly vulnerable in court. Challenging it would take months. The lender's deadline would not wait. No one could legally force Elowyn to marry. Financial pressure could still make freedom feel theoretical. Her board suggested 3 candidates from families already invested in the company. Each offer carried a merger, a board seat, or access to hotel land. Elowyn refused all 3. The elderly trustee surprised everyone by suggesting Dashiell. "He knows the buildings," she said, "and he has never asked you for anything you did not owe." Elowyn almost laughed. Then she considered it. Dashiell's restoration contract ended in 4 weeks. He had no corporate ambitions. He was a widower, a careful father, and the only man in her professional life who had disagreed with her without trying to own the result. She met him in the closed ballroom beneath covered chandeliers. "I need to ask something unreasonable," she said. "You already moved the investor dinner into a greenhouse during a storm." "More unreasonable," Elowyn explained the trust, deadline, and board pressure. She proposed a 1-year civil marriage, separate residences, no romantic obligation, independent lawyers, complete financial disclosure, and an agreed exit once the shares could be refinanced, without danger to employees. Dashiell did not answer that evening. He spoke to Tova only after explaining that children did not decide adult legal arrangements. "Would we have to call her Mom?" Tova asked. "No." "Would she live in our cottage?" "No." "Would you like her if there wasn't a paper?" Dashiell looked toward the hotel windows. "That is the part making this complicated." Tova returned to her sketchbook. "Then make the paper simple." His lawyer did. The agreement waived every claim to Elowyn's company and inheritance. It protected Tova, required separate counsel, kept residences independent, prohibited either party from directing the other's work, and gave both an unconditional right to end the marriage. Dashiell's restoration contract would finish before the ceremony. His own financial schedule caused a different problem. For 7 years, Dashiell had been a contingent beneficiary of Northline Infrastructure Trust, a private collection of rail, power grid, port, and insurance holdings built by his estranged grandfather. Family litigation kept control with independent fiduciaries. Dashiell received no regular distributions and lived entirely on his wages. 3 days before the ceremony, the final appeal ended. The court transferred controlling beneficial rights to him. On paper, Dashiell became one of the wealthiest private individuals in the world. In his kitchen, nothing changed except the number of lawyers calling. He placed the full trust schedule under seal with his attorney and authorized disclosure to Elowyn's independent counsel. The summary sent to Elowen described confidential separate trust interests with no claim against her company. It did not state that one Northline credit fund held the Marquette debt. Dashiell learned that fact the morning of the ceremony. He called Elowen. Before he could explain, she said the lender had issued a foreclosure reservation effective at midnight if the voting shares remained frozen. "My financial position changed," he told her. "You need the complete schedule before we sign. My lawyer cleared the schedule. Your assets remain yours. It is bigger than that." The ballroom doors opened. The lender's attorney arrived with the sealed foreclosure notice. Elowen looked at the clocks, the waiting trustee, and 2,000 employees whose next payroll depended on hours. "Tell me after we stop the freeze," she said. Dashiell should have insisted. Instead, he carried the worn brass elevator key into the ballroom and sat beside her at the signing table. The ceremony lasted 9 minutes. Elowen signed first. Dashiell signed second. The civil officiant confirmed the marriage, and the elderly trustee released the voting shares into Elowen's control. No one applauded. The lender's attorney placed the foreclosure reservation on the table anyway. "The transfer occurred after our internal cutoff," she said. "The debt remains payable at midnight unless the credit committee grants forbearance." Then she noticed the brass key. The tiny compass crest belonged to Northline's founding rail company. She looked at Dashiell, then opened a secure message on her tablet. Her entire manner changed. "Mr. Crane," she said carefully, "our office received notice of the trust succession." Elowen turned toward him. Dashiell did not enjoy the reveal. He looked like a man watching a private truth become public at the worst possible moment. "What succession?" Elowen asked. His attorney placed the sealed financial schedule between them. The Northline Trust held assets valued above $80 billion. Its credit subsidiary owned 51% of the Marquette bond issue. Dashiell could appoint the trust's supervisory council, but conflict rules prevented him from personally ordering a loan extension involving his new spouse. He controlled the fortune behind her company. He could not simply wave the debt away. Elowen's face became still. "You knew? I learned the debt connection this morning. I tried to tell you. You said your position changed. You did not say you became the lender. The trust is the lender. An independent committee controls this decision. That distinction feels very elegant from your side of the table." He accepted the anger. Elowen asked everyone except their lawyers and the trustee to leave. In the quiet ballroom, Dashiell explained the litigation, sealed disclosure, and emergency call. He did not remind her that she had told him to wait. Her urgency did not erase his obligation to speak plainly. "I should have refused to sign until you read it," he said. That answer slowed her anger because it did not attempt to win. Her own lawyer admitted the complete schedule had been available in the encrypted file room. The legal team summarized it because Dashiell waived all claims against Elowen and no one cross-checked his trust holdings against the bond registry. Again, there was no single villain. There was a deadline, an old clause, compartmentalized advisors, and 2 adults who allowed urgency to shorten disclosure. The marriage remained valid. The refinancing did not. Northline's independent credit committee met that afternoon. Dashiell disclosed the marriage and recused himself. Elowen presented the company's real preservation costs without optimistic scheduling. The committee offered a 30-day standstill, not a rescue. Conditions included an independent property audit, suspension of executive bonuses, and a plan separating the hotels from speculative land development. Elowen accepted. Dashiell returned to the caretaker cottage with Tova. He did not move into Elowen's penthouse suite. He did not replace his truck or send wealth managers to the hotel. The trust opened a secure office in another city, and independent fiduciaries handled its daily operations while he learned what control actually meant. Tova noticed 2 unfamiliar cars near the cottage. "Are we rich?" she asked. Dashiell considered the question. "We have access to more money than anyone needs. That is different from knowing what to do with it. Can we fix the cottage roof? Yes. Good. It drips on my atlases. The property audit exposed the deeper problem. The hotels were not failing equally. 9 properties produced steady operating income. 3 required preservation work. 2 suburban acquisitions had consumed most of the debt after projected convention centers were never approved. The board had treated heritage properties as the problem because their repairs were visible. The Marquette Grand also held something no spreadsheet counted correctly. Its original rail easement granted permanent platform access and underground utility rights across the adjoining development block. Those rights were stored in a locked service elevator cabinet omitted from the digitized archive. Tova recognized the cabinet from her sketches. "The old key has the same teeth," she told Dashiell. He did not let the child open an unknown historic lock. A hotel archivist and locksmith documented the cabinet first. With counsel present, the worn brass key turned. Inside were the original easement map, maintenance ledgers, and a 1911 agreement requiring any future developer to preserve public station access. The land buyer's valuation had assumed those rights could be removed. They could not. The discovery did not create money from nothing. It changed which assets were valuable and prevented the flagship from being stripped away as an empty shell. Elowin proposed a restructuring. She would sell the 2 failed suburban projects, protect the 9 operating hotels, place the Grand's rail concourse and worker housing under a preservation covenant, and invite pension funds to refinance the remaining debt at market rates. Northline could participate only through a competitive process supervised by independent committees on both sides. Dashiell supported the plan without directing the bid. Northline did not offer the cheapest interest rate. It offered the longest preservation protections, a paid apprenticeship program, and no right to convert staff housing into luxury units. Another lender offered a slightly lower rate with fewer protections. Elowin chose a blended financing group so no single fortune, including her husband's, controlled the company. Dashiell respected her more for refusing the easy dependency. Their legal marriage remained awkward. Public filings identified him as her spouse and a conflicted trust beneficiary. Gossip called Elowin a fortune hunter and Dashiell a secret predator who had married into his own collateral. They issued one factual statement through counsel and did not perform affection for cameras. Privately, they met every Sunday in the closed ballroom to review the practical terms of the arrangement. After business ended, they sometimes stayed. Elowin admitted she had spent her adult life proving she could preserve a family company without becoming one of its decorative heirs. Dashiell admitted he had rejected his grandfather's world so completely that he confused secrecy with independence. "You thought money would change how people looked at you," she said. "It did. You did not trust me to look twice." "No," he said, "and that was unfair." The answer mattered. At the cottage, Elowin visited only when invited. She helped Tova choose archive-safe sleeves for old elevator drawings. She never called herself a mother, never bought the child extravagant gifts, and never turned family closeness into proof that the marriage was becoming real. One evening, Tova handed her the brass key on its red cord. "Dad says the trust owns railroads," the child said, "but this opens the room that helped us." Elowin closed her hand around the worn metal. Big things are often less useful than the right small thing. Dashiell watched from the doorway. The marriage had started as a tool. Something quieter was becoming true inside it. The restructuring closed 4 months later. The 2 failed suburban properties sold at a loss. The board wrote down the mistake instead of moving it into another forecast. The blended lender group refinanced the remaining debt, and the preservation covenant protected the railway concourse, staff apartments, and winter garden. Northline held only a minority position. Elowin kept control of the company because the plan worked, not because Dashiell purchased obedience. The ancient marriage clause was challenged by the family trustee after the emergency passed. A court removed it from future succession, describing personal marital status as an improper condition for corporate control. No other heir would face the choice Elwyn had faced. The board offered to end the stewardship covenant immediately. Under the prenuptial agreement, Elwyn and Dashiell could also dissolve their marriage without financial penalty. They met in the restored ballroom with both lawyers. The ceiling had been repaired. Fresh plaster followed the original curves, and every chandelier hung uncovered. "The business reason is over," Elwyn said. "Yes." Their lawyers waited. Dashiell looked at the table where the brass key had revealed more than either intended. "I do not want to stay married because a trust once required it," he said. "And I do not want you wondering whether my money makes leaving impossible." He placed a signed dissolution form before her. Elwyn read it. Then she set it aside. "I do not want the arrangement," she said. "I want the man who closed a ballroom before the investors arrived." For once, Dashiell had no careful answer. Their lawyers left them alone. The first kiss came only then, after the corporate clause, debt conflict, restoration contract, and exit papers had all stopped controlling the room. It was brief, private, and chosen. They did not stage a second wedding for magazines. They built a real marriage in ordinary decisions. Dashiell remained in restoration, now through an independent preservation foundation funded by several donors rather than his private trust alone. He accepted a salary and published every related party contract. Elwyn continued running the hotel company. Her compensation and board review remained independent from Dashiell and Northline. Tova kept her room at the cottage even after they renovated a connected apartment inside the Grand. She decided when to call Elwyn family and chose simply Elwyn for almost a year. That was enough. Northline's fortune changed Dashiell's responsibilities more than his habits. He replaced the leaking roof, created education trusts for family members, and directed independent councils to publish labor and environmental standards across the portfolio. He did not pretend $80 billion could become morally simple because its beneficiary wore work boots. 1 year after the signing, the Marquette Grand reopened its railway ballroom for an apprenticeship graduation. Stoneworkers, plasterers, electricians, archivists, and hotel employees filled the room. There were no celebrity guests and no announcement about the owner's marriage. Elwyn wore a fitted emerald silk dress with a tasteful neckline and gold earrings. Dashiell wore a dark navy suit over an open-collar ivory shirt. Their mature attraction no longer needed to hide behind contracts. Tova presented the final graduate with a small brass key made from salvaged elevator hardware. The original worn key remained inside a glass archive drawer beside the restored easement map. Its red cord was faded. The compass crest still caught the light. After the guests left, Elwyn and Dashiell stood beneath the chandelier that rain had once threatened. "Do you ever wish you had told me the number before we signed?" she asked. "Every day." "Good. I would worry if you made peace with it too easily." Dashiell smiled. Elwyn took his hand. Beyond the ballroom doors, trains still passed through the old concourse. Employees crossed the winter garden toward protected apartments. Apprentices carried toolboxes into a building saved by honest costs, independent choices, and one small key no financial model had remembered. The fortune behind the company was enormous. It was not the reason they stayed.